Okay, welcome once again to Ms. Tucker's science class. Today we're going to continue on with the life science, and we're going to be talking about interdependency. And interdependency is the reliance on other populations for survival within a community. So that's a lot to take in. So what exactly does that mean? It means that, let's take for example, a little bunny, a little rabbit. Here, Miss Tucker will try to draw her little bun here. Okay, so here we have a rabbit, a wild rabbit who's living out in the wilderness. And so we have to think about what exactly does this rabbit need to survive? Okay, and this is all about surviving. Okay, so what we know, looks like he only has one ear. We know that he needs food, and we know he needs water, and we know he needs shelter, and we know he needs sunlight. Sunlight. So let's start out with his dependency on food. So when we talk about rabbits, a rabbit is a herbivore. You got that on your vocabulary. And so what does a herbivore eat? A herbivore eats grass. Okay, so he eats grass. So is grass a living or non-living thing? Well, it grows, and so therefore it must be a living thing. So we're going to put a big L because it's a living thing. Well, you know, we talk about, and we're going to talk some more about it when we get into food chains and food webs. How does grass grow? Well, grass grows because of the sunlight falls onto the soil, warms the soil, there's moisture in the soil, there is seed in the soil, and therefore the grass grows. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is food. The rabbit, little Mr. Bunny Rabbit, eats grass, which is a living thing. The other thing he needs is water. Every living thing on the earth needs water. Even the things in water need water. Okay, so but when we talk about water, is water a living or non-living thing? Well, water is a non-living thing. Non-living. Doesn't live. The other thing we need is shelter. So this little rabbit lives out in the wilderness. Depending on what type of rabbit it is, they usually dig burrows, digging holes into the dirt, and they have little dens in there, and that's where they keep safe, and that's where they raise their young. And so the shelter, let's just take it with it being a burrow, but it could be a shelter could be in some grass or some limbs piled up into a kind of a limb pile, and he hides in that limb pile. So his shelter is what? Living or non-living? Yeah, it's also non-living. Dirt, rocks, twigs, things like that are non-living. Well, when you say he lives in the grass, that could be also dead grass, I guess. And then we have the last one, all living creatures need sunlight, and so that is also a non-living thing. Even though we think of the sun as, you know, the source of all of our energy, it is still non-living. Okay, so what we're talking about here is this rabbit's dependency on these living and non-living things. Okay, food, water, shelter, sunlight. This is the dependency. So without these things, is the rabbit going to survive? No. Now, he may go a couple of days without food or a couple of days without water. He may not have shelter. He does need sunlight. Everything, if the sun quit shining, we would all be in a world of hurt. But he depends. This dependency. He depends on these things, and these things depend on him. This is kind of this cycle that we're talking about, okay? So when he eats the grass and he chews the grass down, that makes the next generation of grass grow better, okay? And so that's what this rabbit is dependent on. Okay, so different organisms, and we're talking about, when we talk about an organism, remember, an organism is a living thing, compete for the same resources. So this rabbit is eating grass. Well, what other things eat grass? Grasshoppers eat grass, cows eat grass, horses eat grass. There's a lot of things that eat grass. So they're competing for this food. If we ran out of grass, what would happen to the rabbit? Say you have a pasture, and these rabbits have lived in this pasture for years and years and years, and all of a sudden the farmer decides to put cows on that pasture, and the cows they put too many cows on there, and just the cows ate all the grass away. What would happen to the rabbits? The rabbits would either have to migrate, move, or they would perish, they would die, okay? So the cow and the rabbit are competing for the same thing. Same thing with water. Everything's needing water. You've seen these shows where it's in Africa and it's a drought, and all the animals are at the watering hole, the elephants and the lions and everything, and they're competing for this water. Okay, so a well-adapted member of a community, so this rabbit, are more likely to survive and reproduce are not likely to survive and reproduce under heavy competition for resources. Meaning, if there becomes too many rabbits, the rabbits are not going to survive. So there's this kind of survival of the fittest. So every organism, once again, that's a living thing, needs a source of energy to survive. Now, number one, let me kind of set this, because I'm going to say it between this and the food chain and the food web hundreds of times. The main source of energy, I'm going to put big AL, of all energy is the sun. Without the sun, we wouldn't have anything, okay? Grass wouldn't grow, there wouldn't be water, there wouldn't be shelter, there wouldn't be anything. Because the sun is what starts it. Okay, you say, well, how does the sun start it? Well, the sun shines down, and like I was saying, and the grass grows. Okay, so the main source of all energy is the sun. So when we talk about organisms, there are two main types of organisms. Okay, remember, we've had organisms a couple of times in our vocabulary, and it's all living things. Is a rock an organism? No. Is water an organism? No. Are there organisms in water? Yes. But it's just the living things. Now there are two types. And they are, the first one, which is a producer, and the second one is a consumer. So let's talk about producer. And those are the producers. They produce, I'm going to put make, their own energy. Okay. And then we have consumers, and those are the ones that eat other organisms. Oh, misspelled organism. They eat other organisms for energy. Okay? So we have producers and consumers, okay? The one thing I want you to remember most of all is this one here. I'm going to put a big star. Your producers. That's where it all begins. How many of you been to the grocery store and your mom says, go to the produce section and get me a cantaloupe? Okay, what is produce? Produce is anything that is a vegetable, is a fruit, is a grass, all your plants, and that's how I want you to remember that. P for plants, P for producer. All plants produce or make their own energy. Well, how do they do that? Well, they do that in a real simple thing. Here we have the sun, and here we have soil, and the sun shines down, and we have in the soil, we have water, and say we have seed, okay? So the little seed, it makes a little plant, comes up here. Now you're talking about making your own, producing their own energy. And how do they do that? Well, the sun shining down on the plant with water and air, the plant goes through a process called photosynthesis. And that means they make their own energy to survive. Okay? Photosynthesis. And so through photosynthesis, they make something, whether it's leaves, or it's a seed, or if it's a fruit, they're making their own energy. Okay? So producers are the plants, and they make their own energy through photosynthesis. And you got to remember that. It's going to be on the test. Through photosynthesis. Okay, so then we have, let me erase my cute little picture here. Then we have the consumers. And the consumers is everything that eats other organisms for energy. Now, consumers are going to eat producers. So if you have a consumer, and say the consumer is a goat. That's not a very good goat, but. And what does a goat eat? A goat eats grass. And a grass is a producer. Remember, all plants are producers. Okay? So the little goat, put a little nose on it. The little goat eats the grass. He eats the producer because he is a consumer. Okay? Consumer. He consumes the grass. He eats the grass. The plants don't eat anything. The plants make their energy by photosynthesis. This goat makes his energy by consuming the grass. Okay? So that's how he's making energy. And you say, well, what is he doing with that energy? He's heating his body. He is moving. His internal organs are working. That's part of moving. And we'll get into this later, only about 10% of his energy is going to go to somewhere else. So 90% of it is from making heat and movement. Okay? So remember, a producer, which is a plant, remember the P is for plant, make their own energy. Consumers eat other organisms for energy. Now, just goats aren't the only consumers. So then we have a puppy dog. Oh, well, let's make it a wild animal. So we have an eagle. How about that? I'm not very good at drawing birds, but especially birds of prey, but here, we'll try it. Okay, looks more like a pterodactyl. But say this is my eagle, and what do eagles eat? Eagles eat small animals like rats. Let me draw a little rat. Or a fish or something like that. And he consumes the rat. He eats the rat. Okay, he's eating another organism. What is another organism? A living thing. He's eating another living thing, and he's using that to produce what? Energy for heat and movement. Okay, so there you have the eagle eating either a mouse or say you can do a fish. He can eat a fish, but he's still a consumer. So where do people fall in this? Okay, we don't produce or make our own energy. We're not a plant, so what are we? We're consumers. We eat plants, we eat vegetables, we eat fruits, but we also eat meat. We eat fish. We don't eat mice, but we eat fish, and we eat beef, and we eat pork, and things like that. So we are consumers. Okay? So there we have our little two types of, I didn't write it down, organism. Two types of organism. Remember, and I'm going to keep saying this, what is an organism? A living thing, not a rock. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and erase just this part. I'm going to leave little Mr. Bunny up there because I might go back to him. So now we want to talk about the different types of consumers. There's only one type of producer, and that's a plant. But there are many kinds of consumers. And you all probably know most of these. The first one is a herbivore. What does he eat? He eats nothing. Let me put, well, eats plants. Big O only. Okay, only eats plants. Is a herbivore. That's that. This is a rabbit because he eats grass. He's a herbivore. Cows, horses, goats, sheep, grasshoppers, anything that eats grass or plants is a herbivore. Okay. Then we have number 2 is a carnivore, and he eats other consumers. So he eats, let's make that meat. He is a meat eater, a carnivore. Sharks are carnivores because they get their food from eating other fish and mammals. Our next one is, and y'all know this one, an omnivore. And he eats both plants and animals. So guess where humans fall? Humans are omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. Another one is bears. Bears are omnivores. They eat plants and animals. So those are pigs. Pigs are omnivores. If they have given the opportunity, if they can catch an animal, they will eat an animal. Okay, number 4, and the final one that we're going to learn about is a decomposer. Okay? And a decomposers are, they're omnivores, and they eat dead organisms. They eat the dead stuff. And other waste. Decomposers like fungus. Here's an example. Fungus, bacteria, maggots. That's the baby flies. They all eat dead organisms, and they break down this waste for food. They're real important because they're the recyclers. They recycle nutrients back into the ecosystem. Okay, so that's the 4 types of consumers. These are the consumers. Okay, herbivores. So what is a rabbit? A rabbit is a consumer because he is a herbivore. So rabbits and cows and things like that. Carnivores, lions, wolves, sharks. Omnivores, humans, bears, hogs. Those are omnivores. Decomposers, already giving you a couple. Fungus, bacteria, maggots. Those are the things that eat dead things. Okay, so that is the lecture over interdependency. And you say, well, we kind of got away from the interdependency. Well, not really, because we're still talking about Mr. Rabbit here. He's a herbivore, and what does he depend on? What does he depend on to survive? So the first thing you have to say, is it a living or non-living thing? And if it's a living thing, where does it fall here? Okay, is it, okay, all right. Hope you're doing well. Keep up the good work. Everybody's doing a fantastic job. I miss you guys. And hopefully we'll get to see each other soon.